Okay, we are live now. Uh, I'm just getting I've never used this platform before. So this is the first time for me. But yeah, welcome to my YouTube channel and to this live event where I'm going to be answering your questions from readers, other writers, and anybody who has a question, basically. So started right away. I've got myself organized over here. I've got my questions up on my tablet over here. So I'm going to come to the first question, which came from Justin Alec 807 on Blue Sky. And this is quite an interesting one. So he says, since you've been living in Portugal, is there something, a trend or cultural beliefs, etc., you could point to as being Portuguese horror? So I found this really interesting. I will put this question up actually on the banner here for people to see in case people have issues with hearing or something. So let's put that question up there. So since coming to Portugal, obviously I'm very interested in the folklore. I've been here for about 10 years now, and I did actually write a short story a few years ago called The Solstice, which I have converted to a novella. It needs to be edited and second drafted and so forth. So it's a ways away from being released yet. But yeah, that's about like a belief they still sort of speak to in the north today, which is that around the winter solstice they have lots of people wearing masks and basically staying up until the dawn, effectively, with bonfires. And they do this with these scary masks to scare away evil spirits. So really interesting. Like the idea is that basically on the longest night, the shortest day, it's this possibility for spirits to kind of come into their villages and do harm, kill people, whatever. And so these people, yeah, wear these scary masks. I think they're called caretas, and maybe when I post this up on my newsletter and in the comments and stuff in my channel, I'll put a link to some information about it. But yeah, it's really interesting. The masks are quite spooky, and so I did actually write a novella about that after a short story, which I hope to be putting out at some point in the next year or so. One more example, actually, of Portuguese horror when they were doing the discoveries period and sailing around the world to lots of different places. Um, when they got to what we now consider the Cape of Good Hope, it had a different name back then. Um, it was something much more sinister because no one had ever kind of managed to sail around it successfully, or certainly no one in the West anyway. They had this. There was this sort of sea monster called Adamastor, and Adamastor you can actually see in various places throughout Portugal. So yeah, it's really interesting. Hi Beverly, how you doing? Thanks for popping in. So actually, with that being said, let's move on to our next question. I hope that answers what you were looking for, Justin. And we actually do have a question from Beverly here, so I'm going to go with that one now. Um, so Beverly Lee says, um, would you spend a night alone somewhere haunted? So I've kind of got mixed feelings about this because when I was a teenager, I did have an experience where I saw a ghost. I don't really believe in ghosts, but I kind of saw one anyway. It's kind of a weird thing. So I was dating a girl, and her parents were over the weekend, and we stayed at her house. Obviously, as you do, teenager, parents away. It's a no-brainer, right? And in the morning, when we woke up, we she was making tea, and basically I saw a woman in the mirror, and she definitely shouldn't have been there because this girl I was dating was from Sri Lanka. Her mum was quite dark-skinned Asian lady, wasn't in the house anyway, and this lady in the mirror was definitely a white woman, hair tied up in a bun on the back of her head, quite pale, not like spookily pale, just normally pale, um, and uh, and she was just staring at me in the mirror. So when I look back to where she was in from where I thought I'd be in the mirror, she was uh, not there. And then I looked back to the mirror, she was there. Looked back to where she wasn't there. Blah blah blah. This went on like 2 or 3 times, and then when I did it the final time, she opened her mouth to speak, and I was absolutely terrified all of a sudden, as opposed to just being a bit weirded out. I sprinted down the stairs, and when I got there, my girlfriend said, "Oh, did you see the woman in my room?" And I had no idea that was happening. So it was very scary. So I've kind of stayed in a haunted house before. Um, but I'll be honest, after that experience, I didn't want to even stay in that room, even with her anymore, which she didn't take offense to, thankfully. Um, so staying in a haunted house alone, I really don't know. Maybe, even though I don't really believe in it, maybe I'd be too scared. If I went with someone else, like if I could convince the missus to go to one, I think I'd definitely be up for that. But alone, maybe just a bit too scary. Okay, we've got a question from uh, one of Beverly's very good friends and partners in crime here. And I apologize if I say your name incorrectly here. Um, so this is from Nicole Eigener. I hope I got that right. My God. Um, so yeah, I'm going to put the question up. It's too long to actually get the name as well. But this one is from Nicole. So, would love to hear about your experience with placing your work in a genre. Do you ever struggle with writing dark fiction but having to place it in horror, which is not always accurate? I think of all the questions I received for this event, this is the one that really resonated with me so much because anyone that's read my stuff like knows that I can put in horrific bits, horrific elements in places when necessary. But it's definitely not. I'm not the sort of person who's going to be painting the canvas with crimson, as it were. So I know Catherine McCarthy describes her stuff often as quiet horror, and I very much see myself in that kind of wheelhouse. Um, and it is frustrating. I personally tend to take the view that my friend Michael David Wilson takes on This Is Horror. And he called his podcast This Is Horror because he wants to say, this is horror, this is horror, and this is horror, and essentially talking about what a broad church the horror genre is, whether that be fiction or film or whatever. Um, so I genuinely think that like a quiet horror ghost story is as much horror as something where people are getting butchered on every page. But at the same time, I think as a writer of this quieter horror, I do sometimes see kickback from readers, and obviously it's completely fine for them to have their own perspectives on what horror should or shouldn't be. But sometimes I get like I got a review a couple of weeks ago, which is a really well considered review, and I'm not upset about it at all. But the reader kind of said lots of really good things about Shadow of the Hidden. They really enjoyed it. They talked about like really enjoying the writing style, the characters, but then they also said ultimately, I don't think this can be called horror, and so I'm going to give it 2 stars. Fine, like absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. But it does frustrate me, yeah, that there isn't like a genre where I can kind of insert my work because I think dark fantasy would kind of also be a bit misleading in terms of what my stuff actually is, what the content of it really is. Um, so yeah, it's a really good question. It's something I struggle with a lot, and I don't really have an answer as to how we can do what we can do better with that. Really, it's very difficult. But yeah, thanks very much, Nicole, for the question. That was brilliant. Okay, I'm going to move on to some other questions. I've got a question from a newsletter reader here, which came in via email. This one is from uh, Lalita Creighton. Again, I hope I said your name correctly, Lalita. Um, and this one is, yeah, what do you like to do for fun that has nothing to do with books? So, I mean, I really love traveling. I'm sure some of the people who are ultimately watching this probably feel the same way. It's a really important thing for me, and it's probably the reason why so many of my books take place in different places. Um, Thank you so much, Beverly. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. I'm sure you do. Absolutely. Even though some of your stuff scares the wits out of me, quite honestly. Um, but yeah, so so I really love traveling. During the pandemic, that was one of the most difficult things for me, not being able to kind of go and see different places. So I'm really glad that period of my life is over. I find it a really good, like, psychological um, like I don't know, like a kind of a release for me to go to somewhere else, even if it's somewhere else in Portugal where I live or in the UK where I grew up and lived for 30 years. It's just really exciting for me to be in a place for the first time. I really, really love that experience. Um, and then the other one is food. So if you've read some of my stuff, Lolita, which I imagine maybe you have, considering you're a newsletter subscriber, you probably know that food plays a big part in for me, like establishing a setting, and also like giving a forum for characters to kind of interact. And yeah, food is probably the closest thing I have to a god. So yeah, if I didn't have access to decent food, not necessarily expensive food, but decent food, I'd probably be uh, pretty sad. But yeah, thanks for the question. That was brilliant. And in a follow-up question that's on a similar theme, I've got another one on email. And again, I apologize if I get the name wrong. It's from writer and editor Robin Knabel. I'm sorry if I don't say it correctly. Um, so first of all, Robin says, um, you mentioned delicious food and drink in the books I've read so far, and I love seeing all of your travel photos online. Which countries' foods do you enjoy the most? So, um, I lived for half a year in Turkey, and I have to say that probably that part of the world in general. So, like Turkey, round to Tunisia, Morocco, um, that part of the world generally, I think it probably is my favorite food. It's kind of spicy, but also has like the Mediterranean elements of like super fresh fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. So that I would say is probably my favorite area. Although where I live now in Portugal, we're very lucky as well that we have kind of it's kind of an Atlantic climate and a Mediterranean climate. So we get kind of the benefits of like cold water fish and seafood with all of the like Mediterranean, like amazing juicy tomatoes and salads and veggies and that kind of thing. And it's great. So I really do love Portugal. And if I don't say that, my missus will kill me in real life. So I have to also add that. Um, and then finally, Robin also um, adds this part here. Um, what are some of your faves you've added in your stories? So, in my first book, the Not the Balance, that was set in Poland, and it was set in kind of the Cold War. So it was like in a village setting. Um, People in that environment, as you can imagine, not really very well off. So it's quite kind of like peasanty kind of food. But there's one dish that Natalia, the character in that book, the central character in that book, makes, which is potato pancakes with what they call gypsy sauce, which I know is a little bit racist in translation, but you know whatever, that's what they call it. And it's kind of um, like a sort of dense meat kind of gravy. It's really good for winter. Lots of root vegetables and stuff like that. So you basically make potato pancakes and you just cover them in this sauce. And nowadays they put like yogurt or cream on top of it as well, but that wouldn't have happened in the Cold War because you know communism, Soviet Union, etc. But yeah, I absolutely love that. Um, and also in Shadow of the Hidden, there's a scene where they go to the house of a character Ibrahim, and he roasts up lamb with like a harissa kind of marinade, and they have this thing in there called mashwia salad, and I've never been able to find it anywhere apart from Tunisia. But it is like one of my favorite things to eat in the whole world. It's basically they get like tomatoes and onions and peppers and I think carrots, maybe I can't remember, maybe not carrots, and they actually roast them in the embers of the fire. And then when they've roasted down, they peel them, and then what's left they kind of make it into a mush. Oh, it's got chili peppers as well. And this mush, like, it looks disgusting. It looks like just like green, glowing mush. But you put it like on the side with like meat or like in sandwiches, and my God, it is like life-changing stuff. So if anyone finds out anywhere they can buy it in Portugal, please let me know. I'll be eternally grateful. Okay, we got a couple more questions left, so I'm going to move on to something else. So some of these are perhaps somewhat facetious, but let's go with it nonetheless. So here's one from Bernaldo Miguel Vivo Gonzalez on Instagram. I suspect that's not a genuine name, but whatever. Um, what is the greatest threat to human existence, and does it all really matter though? Bloody hell. Not sure I'm qualified to answer this question, but um, I think maybe humans is the easiest answer to this. Maybe humans are the greatest threat to human existence. Like, the fact that we're kind of going back on like lots of um, pledges that have been made to kind of preserve environmental conditions and kind of like stave off climate change worries me quite a lot. And obviously, people like Donald and Vladimir um, having like small dick syndrome and needing to kind of appease that by saber rattling and possibly causing wars that kill lots of people. This kind of stuff, I think, is really concerning. Does it really matter though? I mean, I'm kind of, as life has continued, I've become more of an anti-natalist, like, which means that I kind of don't really want humanity to continue. I don't really want people to have children. I mean, if you have children, that's completely your business. But like for me, I've decided not to have children because I think we're better off if humanity just lurches towards its eventual doom. I kind of love people, like as individuals. And like one of the things I think that I always get out of traveling is like realizing that like when you meet a person one to one in most places in the world, most of them are fantastic. But I just think as a collective, we're just absolutely terrifyingly useless, and so often get behind people who are shouty and aggressive and make really bad decisions for everyone. So does it really matter though? Maybe not. Maybe not. Okay, and I've got two more questions coming up. This one also is possibly a little bit facetious, from Andy Conduit Turner. So he asks two questions. The first one is nuclear fusion really the solution to energy crisis, or is it destined to forever be a technology that sits perpetually 20 years away? As I am a graduate of philosophy and classical studies, I imagine that I am not the right person to be answering this question. But I do see a lot of like articles and this kind of thing. I'm quite interested in like future technology and kind of renewables and things like that, semi-renewables, as you might call nuclear energy. So I kind of think it could happen. And obviously, like there's a lot of progress happening in places like China, in France, in I know Oxford University have been working on this kind of stuff for a while as well. So I live in hope. Although I did read an article a few months ago in The Economist about how like they were saying that like the idea of free energy is something we should all be worried about, and I just thought this is insane, because free energy would surely resolve a lot of our problems. But what do I know? I'm not an economist, so that was their view. All right, and we've got one more question, which is also from Andy Conduit Turner. So I'm going to put this one in here. I think this is a bit more serious. So Andy says, are there any other mediums you'd especially be interested in writing for? Comics, games, stage, etc. So, yeah, this is a really nice question as well, actually. Um, I've written quite a few stories for audio, both for the Bleakwood podcast, which is run by my friend Paul Stevenson, and also for the other stories, which Andy Conduit Turner is heavily involved with his work at Hawk and Cleaver. So I really enjoy writing for audio, and I found over time that like actually the way I write when I've got an audio market in mind is quite different from how I write if I'm writing for the page, as it were. So I think I would like to explore that more and maybe even write like a full audio drama. I do have like thoughts at times about sort of getting one of my writers groups together and kind of trying to press gang them into collaborating on an audio drama and putting it together ourselves. But I know it's a lot of work involved, and they might just tell me to bugger off, which would be fair enough. So yeah, I mean, when I was young, I got involved in creative arts before I was in a band because I was actually doing a lot of drama. So I was like acting in school plays and this kind of stuff, and I really enjoyed that. So I'd quite like to do, scripting, whether that be for theatre, for film, for TV, for an audio drama, or whatever. I think that would be really cool. So Andy, if you're thinking of bringing back that other series you did for with Hawk and Cleaver. I can't remember what it's bloody called now, but yeah, the series you did with Hawk and Cleaver for audio dramas. I'd be very interested in getting involved with that. But anyway, Okay, so that is all the questions that I have. I'm just going to quickly check my socials just see if anyone else has dropped anything else in there. Um, no, so far no. So um, thank you to absolutely everyone who has dropped questions my way, whether that be via social media, via email, TikTok, whatever. I really appreciate it. I'm going to put all the names of all the people that have submitted a question into, like, I don't know, a hat or a non-hat, whatever, and I'll draw one of those names out and get in touch with that person, and they will get a signed paperback copy of Shadow of the Hidden wherever they are in the world. And remember, guys, if you haven't read Shadow of the Hidden yet, then just this week, I think it's only like another 3 days to go or 2 days to go. It is available for $1.99 US dollars or 155 pounds UK in ebook, which is less than half price. So if you have been thinking about reading some Jinn curse based adventure horror set in the Middle East, now is the best possible time. So yeah, thanks very much everyone for checking this out and for submitting questions. I really appreciate it, and I will speak to you all soon. Bye bye.